Welcome to this evening's climate conversation. I'm Rod Melanson, the City of Bath Sustainability Director. This is another installment of Climate Conversations. We're lucky to have one of our own Climate Commission members, co-chairs, Paul Perkins, for this evening's discussion. I usually start this off with kind of a preamble of what the Climate Commission is. I think we've been doing and who they are. I think we've been doing it enough to just kind of jump into really say, thanks for coming. If it hasn't dawned on any of us here, this is a major issue. Even this morning, if anybody dealt with what was happening on the coast of Maine this morning. I did want to mention the Climate Commission in Bath is working, I'll say tirelessly, putting on this event, putting on continual events, and developing actions to address climate change. While this work continues, it never seems to keep pace. Two major events in 3 weeks, another one on the way, perhaps. And that's just storm weather and dealing with a rising sea. So I just find it's pretty paramount. And then thinking about Vermont in the summer and Western Maine a few weeks ago, we must be able to gather, discuss, learn, plan, and activate. And that's what we're hoping. And I just wanted to plug that over the next year, the commission is really going to be pushing forth a major municipal effort in a climate action plan. And there's a role for everybody that comes out to these events. The role really is to be one, paying attention to what's happening with this effort and ongoing efforts, but also the role of spreading this word that we actually need to do something. And that, a plan is one thing, but communicating that plan and acting on that plan is going to be the big lift. So we're going to be doing that for the next year. Couple things that I need to do. There are bathrooms right outside the door. There are sign-in sheets. Even if you have signed in the past, please check that off. I've signed in the past, yes or no box. There's also exit surveys where we learn from you what we should be talking about in the future with these climate conversations. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Paul.
Do you want to accept questions through the program or have folks hold questions until you're done talking?
Well, when I've been rehearsing this, it takes about a half an hour if I go right through. Okay. So we've got an hour and a half allotted, so maybe I should encourage questions. I don't know. Why don't we just have, if you've got a quick question or something burning, go ahead and ask. Otherwise, it takes about a half an hour to get through. And if we went 45 minutes, that's fine because we've got an hour and a half. That sound okay?
Yeah, and we'll have lots of time for questions after.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for coming. I think I know most of you. We have some people here who know a lot more than I do about climate change and are a lot more authoritative, but I'm going to speak from a homeowner's perspective. I am a co-chair of the Bath Climate Committee, have been for about the past 3 years. Like Rod was alluding to, we on the committee are all pretty passionate about doing something about climate change. And we're having a climate action plan updated this coming year with a consultant. And hopefully we'll have a really actionable plan available in another year, maybe a little bit longer. And we encourage all of you to participate. Come to the community meetings, you can come to our meetings and help us figure out how we're going to address this issue. So disclaimer, I'm not a home performance expert, not a green architect, but I have lived in this house for 27 years. And I actually was a builder for a while, but building science has come a long way since my day. The story is we bought this house in 1997, and it was actually built in the 1840s, which we just recently discovered. Let me do this thing. So not the 1850s. Is this coming through okay? Yep. And when we first moved in, it had an oil-fired furnace and we had steam radiators everywhere. And now we have no fossil fuel appliances in the house, and we get all our power from a solar farm in Whitefield. It didn't happen overnight. We've been there for 27 years. We probably started doing this about 10 or 15 years ago. I think what really inspired me particularly was watching Al Gore's movie in 2006. That really caught me to kind of get off my duff and say I really need to do something personal about this issue. The end goal, get off fossil fuels. I don't know why this guy's so happy. We're taking away his business, but I was happy and he looked happy too. And that was our propane tank being rolled out. That was our last fossil fuel that we had. If climate change isn't something that really you're passionate about, there are a lot of co-benefits to living in an energy efficient house, not the least of which is you're more comfortable, your heating bills are lower. And if you get these fossil fuel appliances out of the house, you don't have the problem with indoor air pollution that sometimes you do with them. So it can be a good step in terms of health. Oh, it came through. Well, this didn't happen earlier. I was going to skip this slide. I think it will anyways, because it takes. I'm just going to explain it. Whoops. I really like to show this slide because I think this is actually from a video of two astronauts talking about their travels in space. These were Apollo astronauts, and they are just in awe of what they see as they go around and around the Earth. And they comment in this video about this paper-thin atmosphere that protects and supports and makes possible all life on Earth. And I think that it helps me to remember what this climate problem is really all about, which is that we're pumping these greenhouse gases up into that little thin layer and changing the composition of the layer so that it's starting to retain heat. The Earth is getting warmer because of our activities on Earth. Normally, you can't really see or feel or touch or in any way grab a hold of the concept of greenhouse gas. It's just sort of a concept. But here you can at least sort of see where the activity is happening. This was a year ago when we had a big storm and high tide. This is down at the Kennebec Tavern. And this is today. Same thing, except worse. And you can see that, see if I can do this right. Yeah, how much the Kennebec Tavern is really, the foundation is sort of submerged. High tide, this is high tide in Bath today. Nice crisp coastline. And this is high tide if we get 8 feet of sea level rise, which Maine Climate Council says is actually a possibility and tells us we should be preparing to manage that. Isn't that right, John? Isn't that the right language? We should be preparing to manage 8 feet of sea level rise. So at high tide, downtown Bath will become an island, and that's in 2100. So I'm only showing these just to kind of underscore the urgency, really, that we're all living with. But getting back to the main focus of the talk, I'm going to talk about retrofitting our house, which is one thing you can do to make a difference. I really like this slide. It came from Richard Burbank, who can't be here tonight, but I'm hoping he's on Zoom. He said he was going to try to make it. He can't be here because he was exposed to COVID. But he was the one from Evergreen Home Performance. He started the company maybe 15 or 20 years ago, who came in and evaluated our house back in 2007. And he gave a talk about a year ago, and I borrowed this slide from his talk.
It is here on Zoom.
Excellent.
If you have any questions,
Great. So, it's nice to think about the green options at the top. When I think about green options in renovating a house, I think about solar panels and electric vehicles and heat pumps and so on. But it's also advisable. I think most of the home energy experts say you want to make sure the house is safe, healthy, comfortable, and durable. So safe means that the foundation isn't crumbling away, that the floor structure and the structure is sound, that there isn't radon leaking through through the floor, that it's comfortable. And as Richard says, composting is great if it's your food waste, but not so great if it's your basement. So you really want to make sure it's durable, which means paying attention to air and moisture movement. That being said, most of these issues, safety, health, comfort, and durability, are addressed, hopefully, by a good home performance expert who will come in and help advise you about any kind of concerns that need to be addressed. And so mostly I'm going to be talking about efficiency and green options. But before I do, who do you call? Who can you turn to for guidance? And I think the best place is this outfit called Efficiency Maine. And they have all sorts of resources. They have a wonderful website which tells you all about the rebates they have and tells you about federal tax credits. And you can call them and talk to them, and they'll help guide you to places on their website. But you can also find a registered vendor there, which is really good. So if you look at this page on the website, you can fill in your zip code, how far you want to have this person travel. And this is where they sort these vendors by the number of rebates, which is sort of a proxy for how popular or how experienced these vendors are. So the first 3 or 4 people that pop up might be the people you want to call. So we started in 2007. We had a free 1-hour consult, and that was followed up by a full home performance audit. They looked at, this is just sort of a schematic, obviously. They looked at all the places that air might be leaking through to the attic or leaking into the basement through the rock wall that we had. And what they found was that we had lost it in my notes. There it is. We had air leakage, which was equivalent to about twice what the industrial standard is for air changes per hour. So, in other words, the house was quite drafty, and it was like having a 18-inch square hole open all the time, blowing in and out through the house. So it was pretty drafty, and we could feel it. We also had a rock wall around an old 1840s rock wall, and they say that the rock wall, the 2 feet that's above grade, has roughly the insulating value of a pane of glass. So it's a huge source of heat loss. So that was the second thing they pointed out. And the third was the moisture issue. We had dirt floors in the basement, and those are notorious for allowing water and moisture to get into the house and find its way up through the structure, up into the attic, cause problems with condensation on your framing members, and that can set the stage for for rot. So what did we do? This is the first thing that they did. So they came in and put see this, I don't know if you can see, this is a plastic along there, heavy duty plastic that went up the rock wall. This was all a dirt floor at the time, went down across the dirt floor, up the other side, and was all sealed off, taped and everything. So it was able to stop moisture movement and also air. And then they sprayed this foam on top of it. So our nice, beautiful rock wall turned into this. which isn't quite as aesthetically appealing, but we don't spend a lot of time down in the basement looking at the wall anyway. And it's a whole lot more comfortable. We really did notice, wouldn't you say, Nance? We noticed the change and the comfort when we did that. And 6 years later, when we've had enough resources, we had Evergreen Home Performance come back. So this was 2013, maybe. And we blew in cellulose all into the attic. They both blew in like several feet of cellulose. And I don't know if they did this. This isn't from our house, but hopefully, and I'm sure Richard did this, but they sealed off around all the penetrations into the attic, electrical boxes or plumbing vents or the chimney to make sure you weren't getting air leaking up into the attic. Somewhere along the line, we replaced the windows. I think we actually did it twice. The first time we did it, we didn't have a whole lot of resources and we bought some fairly cheap windows, which weren't really double pane. They were single pane with a so-called energy panel. And so eventually we ended up replacing them gradually with double glazed, more higher quality windows. And then we haven't done a lot of this, but there's also another option, which is way cheaper. It's not as convenient for sure, but it does the same sort of insulating job, which is to replace them with what they call window insulating inserts. And you can build these yourself. You can also, we've had in Bath the last couple of falls, we've had a program called the Window Dressers Program, where people put in their request for a window insert and that they want built for windows in their house. They come and it's actually pretty community building and people enjoy the process of getting to know each other. Nobody has any skills doing this when they come and they assemble these window frames. And that's one in our house that we did put in the mudroom. And I did put a few in our barn. And actually brought one. What about that? So this is just a little sample, but it's got 2 layers of plastic on both sides. And it's got this foam, so it's sort of friction fits into the frame. And it's really effective. Of course, you want to be able to open your windows, you have to take them out and store them in the summertime. One of the questions I've had is, of course, it's plastic. What's happening in terms of recycling, and that's not the most optimal thing to have plastic windows, I guess, but they're quite insulating. Please interrupt me if you got questions. Okay. Yes. No, you just tell me. Okay. Okay. So, Energy Star appliances, look for the Energy Star label on appliances. It's a federal program that rates appliances for efficiency. And then LED lights are kind of a no-brainer. They save, I think, something like 90% of the energy that an incandescent bulb burns. They use 90% less energy. So if you have a lot of lights that you tend to keep on, they can save quite a lot of money. Heat pumps. We have the honor of Thomas Tudor being here today, who's from Revision Energy, and they did a lot of work on our house. So Thomas came to help answer questions that I can't. And they put in, starting, I forget when we put this in. When would you say we put that in? 7 or 8 years ago? This was the floor model of a heat pump. And that's where we had an old steam radiator, which we took out. So it sort of fit nicely into that spot. And this is another place where we had a steam radiator. And we put, actually, this was a year later, we put this one in and one upstairs. And we really can heat the whole house with these heat pumps. They're really amazing. And they don't give off any noxious fumes, so the indoor air quality isn't compromised. And they're highly efficient. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention about them, and I should be mentioning this as I go, is that there are whole lots of rebates available. Rebates and tax credits now to make all of this stuff way more affordable than it was. So when you go to the Efficiency Maine website, you can look into these rebates. And I think in the case of heat pumps there, if you qualify as a low income person, you can get up to $10,600 for these. So that's pretty amazing.
Do you need a secondary heat source on really cold days?
We have a secondary heat source. I don't think we need it, but we don't ever experiment to see if we do. And this is bringing me to the next slide, which is our wood stoves. So we do have 2 wood stoves, and we love them, and they provide a lot of ambiance, and you can stand by it and get warm. So it's a hard thing to imagine giving up. However, wood does release carbon dioxide when it burns, so we are contributing to the climate problem. Ideally, ideally the wood that you're burning is also being sustainably replaced, so that the carbon that you emit when you burn it is being reabsorbed by other trees or new growth. I don't know how you quantify that or verify that, but that's ideally what would happen. Unfortunately, wood stoves also have other characteristics that maybe are not so desirable, which is that they do emit other pollutants, including black carbon. And I've been reading about that. And I guess black carbon is a pretty potent global warming gas. It's basically soot, that's my understanding. So if it gets up into the atmosphere, it can trap heat just like the other greenhouse gases. Yeah.
Have you guys experienced like the power going out in your house?
Yep.
I assume you might have.
Yes.
And then when that happens, if you were being held solely by heat pumps,
Yeah.
are your 2 wood stoves carrying you over, or are you generator, whatever?
No, the stoves are great. This one over here in the front room is wonderful, but it's sort of a small, tiny room on the front. This one is a very small stove, but it's the only one we could actually get that was EPA certified that would fit in this fireplace. It doesn't pack a lot of punch, but it certainly keeps us comfortable, and you can stand near it. And this one over here can overheat the whole front of the house. So I don't think heat's a problem. Yeah, we can survive without power. In fact, we have a number of times.
So are you heating, besides the food stove, are you heating your entire house just on 3 heat pumps?
Yeah.
Mini splits?
And actually, mostly just 2, the 2 downstairs.
And how many square feet?
The house?
Yeah.
I don't know, it's probably 1,800, something like that. It gets kind of a convoluted upstairs, so I'd have to think about exactly how to measure that. We don't have well, actually we do have a generator, but we don't have it at the house. We have it at camp where we keep it, but we could use the generator to, if we'd had it, we could use it to hook up some lights and things like that, but we don't really need it for heat if we've got plenty of wood. So there are great rebates available for I'm sorry, that was heat pumps. So the wood stoves, I think the climate impact of burning with wood is a little bit controversial. It's hard to imagine giving it up. There was a story I came across about a person in Vermont who was trying to sell this old timer on pellet stoves, because apparently they are more cleaner burning, supposedly. And the property owner said, well, I have 100 trees up my property, but don't have a single pellet tree. I think that people are wedded, at least we are, and I think a lot of other people are kind of wedded to wood heat. So I'd be interested to hear people's comments on that afterwards. Heat pump water heaters. This is what Efficiency Maine is all about these days. This is apparently the most, their #1 recommendation is they got a heat pump hot water heater. It sort of baffles me. This is sitting in a cold space in your basement and apparently efficiently brings enough heat from that space to bring your water up to 120 degrees and be economical. What we have is a solar hot water system that we installed in 2007, which at the time was the way to go. So we have solar panels up on our roof, and the system works great. Revision Energy put this in. And in the summer months, I think we can say we pretty much get free hot water off of this for about 4 months. But it's apparently not the way to go. Efficiency Man is recommending these, and they have incredible rebates for them. You can almost get them for free if you're low income now. And even if you're moderate income, you get quite a bit of discount.
I
Yeah.
can chime in on
Yeah, please.
the solar hot water used to be the way to go, as Paul said. But those systems are still a bunch of plumbing components and mechanical systems, which really have only increased in cost, whereas solar electric panels have come down in cost. So you're more effective now to use your roof space for solar electric collectors and then run a heat pump water heater than to use that space for solar hot water. So we continue to service these systems, and the ones that are working well, we keep going and replace collectors on the roof when needed. And still is a great system, but if you're considering now, today, we actually don't install new solar thermal systems because it's also, as Paul said, the flexibility in the summer with solar electric, you get to make excess power and bank it essentially on your bill by sending it to your neighbors' houses. And in Paul's case, he makes extra hot water that he doesn't get to use in the winter.
Induction stoves. We got this about a year ago. It's all electric, but it works with some sort of magnetic principle. Heats water. This is a kettle. Heats this kettle of water about twice as fast as our gas stove did. It's got a smooth cooktop, which is really easy to clean. And I don't think there's really any drawbacks to it that I'm aware of. Is that right, my wife?
But when the power's out, if the
Yeah.
turn the gas on.
Yeah, that's true. When the power's out, it's a bit of a drawback. This guy here was claiming that you could put your face down right after he boiled this pot of water. You could put your face down and not burn it as a way to say that these things cool right down. I sort of tried this. I wouldn't try it. It was cooler. I mean, it was too hot to put my hand on, but it does cool down way faster than an electric resistance stove. Let's see. Believe it or not, this is the most popular strategy on our home. We had a home tour this summer, and people came through, and this is the thing they liked the most, was our little home built laundry drying rack, which I just built in the shop with some dowels and some 1x2s. And Nancy, who does all the laundry, bless her heart, hangs up all the clothes there in the wintertime, right? You don't use the dryer at all. Yeah, and in the summertime uses a clothesline. And people said, wow, that's really cool. Where'd you get that? She got it out of some magazine and we built it. So that's a great way not to use a dryer. Up there you see our solar hot water panels, which take up the space that we might have otherwise used for photovoltaic electric panels. But even this much roof wouldn't have been probably enough for our needs. That's our electric Chevy Bolt, which is a 2020. We haven't had really any problems with it. It requires almost no maintenance other than changing your tires. You don't have to stop at gas stations. It rides smoothly, it's quiet, and it's got great acceleration. The real drawback is that if you want to drive any distance, like we went to Western Mass a few months ago, And after you've gone a couple hours, you need to really be thinking about charging it. So we probably spent half our time looking at our cell phones, trying to find a place to charge the darn thing. So the infrastructure for charging electric vehicles is a little bit spotty still. So you have to be patient about that. But otherwise, that's really the only drawback, I think. Except I do read about all the embodied energy that's in these electric vehicles and the minerals that are coming from overseas and social justice issues and exploitation issues. So in any event, it's what's being recommended as the way to go for from a climate change standpoint. And that's our charger there on the wall. I think I'll skip that. Electric snowblower and electric lawnmower, they both work great. Just got this last winter. I've used it about 3 times and it's really fun. And it's powerful enough. I was amazed. I was thinking it wasn't going to be powerful enough, but it seems to be so far. This I've been using for a few years, electric lawnmower. And when you look at how much there is in the way of emissions from 2-stroke engines, they say they can spew nearly 20 to nearly 300 times the emissions of a car. So these lawn tools that we use, gas-powered lawn tools, are really not good for climate change. So if you're considering a snowblower, a lawnmower, or if you must, a leaf blower, think about doing an electric one. Composting, that's our bin on the kitchen countertop. That's our compost bin. I take the compost out maybe every other day and put some straw on top of it, and I don't turn it or anything. I just let it sit there, and it just gradually composts down. And after about a year, I can take this bin off, put it over here, and then I take the top half and put it in that bin, and the bottom half is pretty well turned into compost. So instead of the food waste going to the landfill, where it may decompose anaerobically and release methane, it's here not releasing methane and providing good soil compost for planting. I really should have Nancy describe this slide, but I know she won't want to. So over the last couple of years, Nancy did a whole lot of work digging up our lawn and replacing it with native plants. So we have all these native plants, which are good for the pollinators and the air and the water and the birds. But from a climate standpoint, I think, I don't know this for a fact, but my understanding is that it enhances carbon storage. It's better for carbon storage to have these are pretty small, but when these plants grow up, then just having flat lawn. So it's a carbon sequestration step. Thank you for coming. Oh, okay. And this is our solar farm, which Revision Energy built. And this was up in Whitefield. Nancy and I took a trip up there a few weeks ago to see the farm. This is not a picture we took. This is a picture from a drone. But we own 1% of this now. And that's where our electricity theoretically is coming from. So it's all being generated by the sun. You know, I look at this site and I think, oh boy, they cleared all this woods to put these solar panels up there. Is that a good thing from a climate standpoint? And I think that's a controversial point, you know, that I don't really know what the right answer is, but you know, you're taking away all that forest that was sequestering carbon and replacing it with solar panels to generate renewable energy. In this case, apparently the homeowner was going to cut this anyways, and it was not old growth, so I don't quite know where the trade-off is there. But the end result is, at least projected end result, is that if we had gone with business as usual, according to Revision Energy's projections, we would have spent around $97,000 on electricity over the next 25 years. The solar project, after the initial expense plus all the maintenance over the 25 years, comes out to about 43, and the electric delivery charge to about $6,500. The difference is about $47,000 saved over 25 years, which is pretty significant. Does that sound right, Thomas?
Yeah, you can think of it as pre-buying your electricity.
Yeah.
For the next 25 years.
Yeah.
And on the carbon piece, each of those solar panels is a much more efficient converter of sunlight into energy than leaves on a tree are. And so from a carbon perspective, that is offsetting significantly more. Especially when you compare it to burning fossil fuels
Okay.
for the energy to power your home
Okay.
and lifestyle instead. So it does, we obviously don't want to remove trees if we don't have to.
Right.
But it is still clearly, each of those solar panels is offsetting, dozens to potentially hundreds of trees worth of carbon in its.
Interesting. Okay, yeah.
So does this solar project, is that only the energy generation, or is that also the delivery, or just the delivery still from CMP?
My understanding that this amount here is the delivery charge.
That's
Yeah.
So the solar project does this is an ownership model solar farm, different than subscription, which I think Paul's gonna talk about in a second. So this is the exact same bill credit mechanism as if you had panels on your own roof. So it does offset your supply charge of your bill and your transmission delivery charge of your bill. It does not offset your minimum charge, which is like $21 now. Which you can't offset no matter what you do. That's the price you pay for having a meter.
And then this little factoid down here, apparently the equivalent to the amount of CO2 you're saving in terms of emissions is equal to 12,000 miles not driven in a typical car per year. I'm not going to talk much about this, but there are different community solar options. John and one of our other climate committee members is going to talk about this in more depth in March, but there are different options. We went for the solar ownership community option, but there's one, you don't have to invest anything and you still get 10 to 15% savings. I don't know why everybody's not doing that because it makes sense. So winding up, Efficiency Maine is really the go-to place to get guidance and to find about all these kinds of climate strategies and actions that you can take. That's their number, and they're very available and want to help. I thought I would share this slide. This has nothing to do with Bath. But this is a rooftop garden on the top of a hospital in Boston, which I have only read about, I haven't seen. But they decided to start growing food up there. And they supposedly grow 5,000 to 7,000 pounds of produce, which gets on the menu in the hospital. They save money in the process. All of processing and packaging and transporting of produce doesn't have to happen. They attract all sorts of curious visitors and volunteers, and they have a free summer camp for youth wanting to learn about gardening. So I think the lesson for me here is there are lots of creative things we can do, and don't think you're too small to make a difference. Sorry, back up. I think we sometimes think that we have to wait around for these grand policies to come down from Washington or somewhere to really solve the problem. This is too much. I'm just one person, but I think one person can make a big difference. And this is one institution that I think's obviously inspired a lot of people. So similarly, I suggest that we all try to find ways that we can set examples. And thank you for listening. So, yeah, Nancy.
So I have questions about the heat pump water heaters, because
Yeah.
I just hear they're really fantastic, but as somebody who has a boiler, I have a really weird system. My boiler
Yeah.
goes into forced hot air instead of into a radiator. And so that's where I'm getting the hot water from. But is there any benefit, since I already have the boiler going, to actually getting the electric heat pump to replace my hot water on that portion of my system? Or is it?
Thomas, you want to take over and field, what you
Yeah,
field the
heat
questions?
pump water heaters always make sense if you have the basement space for them. So you need like 800 cubic feet at least of air for them to have access to. And so sometimes ceiling height is a constraint, you know, because they are making a tank with the top. But yes, really no matter what your current situation is, unless you have a basement that is so poorly insulated and drafty that it gets close to freezing now, and you don't want to have something sucking a few degrees of heat out of that space. I've got a heat pump water heater in my basement, and I sort of had that scenario. It's like a largely above grade 1910 built house, pretty shaky. When I bought the house with gas boiler, was dying, and I want to rip it out anyway. I put a little temperature sensor down there, and it lowers the temperature about 5 degrees. So you do want to think about basement insulation often with those. But it's like 5 degrees when it pulls the heat out, and then that rebounds from the slab. But they are the lowest cost way to make hot water, always.
Well, and if you have to, get your hot water from your boiler, you have to run the boiler all summer.
I turn it off.
So you
I only turn it on when it's hot water.
We had a question online about insulating unvented crawl spaces. The question was, so in this house, the perimeter wall is already insulated, and they were wondering whether it was recommended to insulate the ceiling of the crawl space, which would be the subfloor of the house, in between the joists as well, to reduce heat demand.
Is Richard on there?
That's what I was gonna say.
This is a Richard question. I mean,
Richard, if you're available to talk, I'm going to, oh, good, I'll give Richard permission to talk, and, there. All right,
It's
Richard.
gonna be hard.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
Hi there. Well, that can vary in the answer. Number one, the floors will be warmer if you do that, and a crawl space that doesn't have a heating system in it definitely is going to be cooler. If there's air leaking past your perimeter wall that's insulated, then it's definitely an issue, and it can cause leaks through the floorboards if this is an older house. So it really depends on the house. If this is a newer construction, let's say, and the existing fiberglass bats fell down because the critters moved into it and weighed it down and it fell down, and there's a bunch of things that could happen. From a strict dollars and cents standpoint, it's not going to be a huge return, but it will be a great return on warmer feet, especially if you switch to heat pumps and you walk around on the floor. So that's, and I'm happy to answer the question in your case more directly if you want to reach out to me personally.
Are there issues doing heat pumps, solar panels, all that in historic district?
good question.
I'll take this one.
Yeah,
So if you have to get permits if you're in the district and doing a home renovation, you're going to get permits. Solar is allowed. They have standards. So they're pretty minimal standards too. It's really just keeping it flush. It's actually how Revision or any solar installer would put them on anyhow at this point.
Yeah.
But those were put in, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. So solar is an allowed item. Heat pumps, those don't typically trigger any historic review. Neither do CMP meters when those go in. I mean, so.
Any other questions?
Not seeing any others online.
Yeah. So Thomas, oh yeah. Yeah,
Walls,
yeah.
flooring and so on. Did you change the flooring of the basement?
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that. So, we originally had a dirt floor. So they put the plastic down over the dirt floor and up the other side of the rock wall. We spent the next 2 years slipping and sliding across that plastic, it got all muddy and yucky. And finally, we just said, we got to put down a rough concrete slab. So we did that. And then it was great, it was much cleaner. You want to say, if you have anything more you want to add?
I mean, I think you covered it well, Paul. I have a sort of similar story of my house in Portland. You know, I think what we like to do at Revision is help people put the building blocks of the clean energy transition together, because every house is a little bit different. And you do have interesting questions around crawl space insulation, and you know, you're changing the infrastructure of the house, especially when you get into the heating system. So there's a lot to try to figure out, but you know, the Inflation Reduction Act basically means everybody has an electric bank account. Like there's this money out there for everybody to electrify their homes and their lifestyle through tax credits and state rebates. So there's never been a better time in that regard. And yeah, Revision tries to offer all the parts of that electric lifestyle. So heat pump water heaters, air source heat pumps for heating and cooling, electric vehicle chargers, solar electric panels on the roof, and even battery storage if you want some backup power in an outage as an alternative to a generator. So yes, I've been able to do a similar thing to Paul at my house and get to nearly net zero, though now I'm like fully electrified transportation. And so my array on my roof doesn't quite make all my electricity anymore. So I'm gonna buy into the next solar farm. And yeah, the difference between subscription and ownership, both are really good. And, you know, we're building some big solar projects in Maine to power those. The ownership model I like because the tax credits come to Maine, you get those incentives, you're actually owning the asset. The subscription type is much easier and lower entry, but there's sort of a middle man who's getting the incentives and using your electric bill and giving you part of that cost savings. Yeah.
The heat pumps and the heat pump hot water heaters, does their efficiency change dramatically over like a period of years? Like if we had some put in 14 Fujitsus that are 10 years old, is that technology, has it advanced enough in a decade where on those below 30-degree days, maybe those heat pumps are even more sustainable than in the past? Like, can you see that improvement over a decade?
Yeah, there's a rating they use for heating, it's HSPF, heating season performance factor. So you could check out what those Fujitsus were, and definitely the modern heat pump is going to have a better HSPF rating. That being said, I wouldn't recommend replacing those. I just recommend servicing them to get them through their, you know, full useful life. Unless you're like having significant like comfort issues where they're just not doing the job. So yeah, modern heat pump would be more efficient, but not enough to drive you to replace that system before its useful life, in my opinion. Heat pump questions. We'll go here first.
Sure. In regards to the solar farms, I think you said this earlier, but can you confirm which one is less expensive, the partial ownership or the subscription model?
Yeah, the subscription is just like signing up. So it's no cost to you.
and you just get a 10 or 15% discount every month on your bill. You're basically turning over your electric bill to this subscription solar farm developer, and they take it over and they manage the billing. So depends, actually. Some of them you just get one bill, some of them you still get your CMP bill, and then you get your subscription bill. It can be a little bit confusing, but those are, yeah, straightforward way to get a little piece of the savings of solar electricity. Ownership model is an upfront investment. You can finance those, which a lot of people are doing these days. If you, have a little bit of a down payment, then you can, within like a year or two, after you get the federal tax credit, you should be having similar or lower cost monthly loan payments than your previous electric bill. So it kind of depends, but
So how much money are you talking about to buy into a solar?
yeah, well, Paul gave his example, but it really depends on your electric bill and how much power you're trying to offset. The easy answer is whatever your monthly electric bill is now, you could take out a 20-year solar loan and have a similar monthly loan payment to your current electric bill, but be paying off your ownership solar farm and staying at whatever your monthly bill is now for 20 years, and then not paying an electric bill while historically CMP's rates go up, although they just came down in January.
Does Revision offer that loan to us?
Yep. Yeah, we work with a New England-based credit union. So there's 20 years, the longest term to get you the lowest monthly payment, but you can't go 15 or 12 or 7 if you want to pay it a little bit more and pay it off quicker.
So is that more practical in the sense that, like, say I was gonna buy the equipment outright to have solar put on to get me to 0 per month, right?
Yeah.
This is my kilowatt hours I need.
Yeah.
That equipment essentially is going to have a shelf life for me, though, if I buy it and own it. Whereas if I buy into a farm, the bill makes sense, but when that equipment comes due, I don't have the overhead or the responsibility of replacing the equipment. So like it's kind of more sustainable beyond 20 years, right? Because it doesn't the stuff get outdated to a degree, like if I owned it outright?
Yeah, so with solar, panels have a 25-year power output warranty that protects you against their degradation over time. You know, they are exposed to the elements, so they do reduce their output by less than 0.5% per year for 25 years. Some are even better than that now. And so the ownership model farm like Paul is in is 25 years, and then we expect them to exercise their 2 5-year extensions to get to 35 years. That's like what we expect as the useful life of solar that we're installing these days. It's obviously a long time from now, so hard to be super precise. The economics between that and putting panels on your own roof or your own backyard are quite similar. It really comes down to like how sunny your roof or property is and what the electrical infrastructure there is and how, costly it is to interconnect. So that's like the really great part about the ownership model farms is you're accessing economies of scale for a big project, lower cost per panel. And for the individual, it works out to be pretty similar economics. There's another piece which Paul mentioned is like the annual membership cost that you have to pay is your 1% portion of the lease payment and the liability insurance payment and the operations and maintenance, basically clearing, mowing around the farm. Revision does an annual like inspection and health check of those farms. If you have it on your own roof, you've got your own, monitoring, you can see what's going on.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just one thing to add to the ownership model is that because you own the asset, you can actually sell your membership to someone else if you were to move out of state, for example, or if you were to move within your distribution providers area, seeing to a person. You could take it to your new home, which is a hard thing to do if you have which is actually a subtle flexibility.
Yeah, so anywhere within CMP territory, you can reallocate your credits to follow you every month on your bill. And yeah, you can sell it or, find other family or friends or someone that you want to give it to if you were, no longer had an electric bill in CMP territory.
We have an online question, okay. So this was a question about heat pumps, asking if a heat pump can produce hot water to do both domestic hot water and radiant heat hot water, or are the systems always separate?
Yeah, good question. So sort of the holy grail of heat pumps is an air to water heat pump system for hydronic, for forced hot water distribution. There has been some equipment that could do that for radiant, which is a lower temperature distribution than most that we have around here, which is baseboard or radiators where you need like 170 plus degree water. And there aren't any air to water heat pumps that can provide that level of hot water. So it's rare to be able to do a heart transplant with the heating system with the air to water heat pump system. There are some that can do radiant. We've installed a couple different brands in the past. One of them is actually no longer available, which was unfortunate because we thought that was a good piece of equipment. And the other one, we didn't like the performance and quality of the system, so we're not offering that. We keep hoping that Mitsubishi will bring over their air to water equipment that's available in Europe. And it's kind of funny, we don't really think of this in New England, but we're like the only part of the country that has hot water distribution, has boilers. It's a really common nomenclature thing. Everybody thinks they have a furnace. Furnace is actually forced hot air, and most of the country has furnaces. And so the market for a hydronic solution that's a heat pump is actually pretty small. It's only really New England. And so companies like Mitsubishi have not gone to the trouble of getting UL listed and getting their equipment over to North America for an air to water heat pump system to do radiant. So to answer that question, that was a very long answer. Sort of, and separate, they're almost always separate from domestic hot water. And you can't do a heat pump water heater like we were talking about to heat for space heating. Just for domestic hot water showers and everything else.
There's a wonderful amount of talk about going all electric, but do you have any commentary about like the big picture as far as the regional grid and the national grid being upgraded to be able to handle that much change?
Yeah,
It's not there right now, is it?
it's a great point. Yeah, we need to upgrade the grid kind of regardless of what we do. I really like, and like the grid likes distributed generation. So rooftop and small scale solar actually often helps some of those issues of needing larger transmission lines. But we're going to need to build out our grid probably like 2 or 3 times the capacity that it is today around the country. And there's a really big project. The alternative, though, is that we just keep burning fossil fuels.
So does Maine have anything like, is there a big initiative? Is there something?
Yeah, I mean, we're actually pretty fortunate in Maine because we don't have a huge population and we have, relatively a lot of land, and we can build new things a little bit easier. It's also pretty cool. Dr. Richard Perez did this whole study on like what would it take Maine to get to clean energy, 100% clean energy on the grid. He actually found 95% in current battery costs and energy storage costs make sense, and still 5% natural gas. So it's like half wind, half solar, 5% natural gas. And the amount of solar needed for Maine is like, it was like 80 square kilometers or something, which is less than our current high density urban environment right now in the state. So that's to fully electrify transportation and heating and everything else. We do need to build some more poles and wires to get there. Energy storage is still this really crucial part, and there's a lot of exciting stuff happening because, you know, if you can have energy storage throughout that grid and closer to where those congestion points are, then you don't necessarily need to just keep building poles and wires from this sort of centralized hub grid that we've built everything around. So it's a very good question. It is like the hot topic and will be for the foreseeable future on, you know, what the best way to do this is. But we also, I get a little frustrated because I think we have a lot of like really cost-effective solar and wind projects that we can build today that help today, and that we don't have to like try to solve that future problem quite yet. And I think, you know, the sea level rise events, like I grew up on Islesboro, we're going up there this weekend, and like little family camp like almost got washed away. My dad just sent me photos today. So yeah, I think the urgency, like if we had started 40 years ago, we could have been more sort of methodical in all of this, but we really don't have the time now.
If I could just chime in on that. Maine is very aware of the problem that you raised. Maine government itself will require it to develop an energy plan. They have said that energy plan is until early 2024. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. But it has all those elements that we've been talking about in the draft material. It talks about increasing capacity. It talks about more flexibility in transmission and distribution to be able to have distributed sources. It talks about storage to buffer the load. So I can't claim that what it's going to say, but I can say there's a group out there that's working on it, that's putting that plan together.
The other one little piece I'll throw in there, because I learned this recently, one of the likely future benefits of electric vehicles, if we can really access that energy storage, those batteries in all those vehicles. Right now, I think there's like 8 million EVs on the road in the US, which if you add up all those batteries, that is equal to the largest nuclear power plant in the US. And we're expected to add 8 million new EVs like roughly every 2 years. So we're basically adding the capacity of a nuclear power plant of energy storage and onto the, not necessarily onto the grid. We need to figure out how to, you know, vehicle to grid, vehicle to home is something we've been talking about for a long time. And we still, you need the car manufacturers to work with the bidirectional chargers and the grid operators, and it's complicated, but I think that's a huge asset that will get figured out so that we use some of that energy storage to help buffer these peaks in demand. You know, the whole grid is built so you can keep up with that top use of energy throughout the year. And if we can just figure out how to bring those down and lower our valleys, we don't have to build the 3x transmission. It's more like the 2x transmission.
We had a comment from online, and you wanted to add to it, that'd be great. So the comment was that it may be beneficial to mention that all electric houses may need a 200 amp electric panel. Can you
Yep.
talk more about that?
Yeah, it's a great point. There is a little bit of money. There's a $600 federal tax credit for upgrading your electric panel. It is, yeah, if you have a relatively small home, you may be able to go fully electric on 100 amp service. If you have a larger home and you want one or more, level 2 higher speed electric vehicle chargers, then you will need to upgrade that to 200 amp service. That's a few $1,000s at least. But if it's got its own standalone $600 tax credit. If you do it as part of a solar electric system, it's all counted in the 30% federal tax credit. And the heat pump tax credit now is $2,000 per year, but it's 30%, but capped at $2,000 per year. So you could, depending on your heat pump project cost, get a little bit that way too. But so there's, some interesting ways to try to maximize the incentives there.
Thomas, I kept pointing out efficiency demands, the go-to resource. Do you agree with that? That's really the place to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've done a really amazing job and won some awards nationally for their education, specifically around heat pumps. Like Maine is really one of the leaders in the whole country on heat pump adoption. And I think Efficiency Maine is really the one to congratulate for that. Larger rewiringamerica.org is another good site that's they have a little calculator. You can type in your zip code and your income and your tax filing status, and they'll give you some idea of your incentives, that sort of electric bank account idea. Though the state rebate money, you need to go to Efficiency Maine for the details on that. And just a quick piece on the heat pump rebates. They used to be different. They just recently changed. So they're now, you only get a rebate if you're addressing the whole house. So you need to cover at least 80% of the heating load with heat pumps. But the rebates are now larger. It's between $4,000 and $8,000 depending on your income level. And you can leave your central system in place, but you need to turn it off. Because it is one of these things with old houses, especially, it's really hard to know before your first winter how a heat pump system is going to perform. And you may need another heat pump or some electric heat in that small little back office or bedroom. So as a contractor, it's it can be challenging to predict exactly, because we don't know what's in your walls. We're not doing an energy audit. So if you've done that work, if you've already done some insulation, that's huge to make heat pumps just more effective, more comfortable, and less sort of unknowns about how they're going to operate and how much you're going to like them.
Are there heat pump systems? I have a mini split in my house, but are there systems that can hook into your venting system in the house and run the whole house system?
Sort of. You can, there are some that are designed to hook into ductwork. We don't install any of those, and it's really tricky to know how well that ductwork was installed and maintained. And it's there's some question marks there.
So if you have like an old house that's mostly separate rooms, it's hard to get the airflow and go between all the other rooms. You're basically just stuck with putting in a whole bunch of mini splits.
Yeah, you put in mini splits for all the main areas, and then electric heat for the rooms that don't make sense. There are also interesting things you can do with, vents between rooms, between floors. They're passive. They also have some through wall vents that we've experimented with a little bit, or just sort of trying to open up those walls a little bit, do a little bit of a renovation project.
Yeah, then you really start getting into.
It's 6:40, we need to be out here. At 7, library closes at 7.
We've got a couple more, so 5 more minutes for questions,
Yep.
and then we'll wrap up.
I was just about to say
Is Richard still on? I don't know if he has any words of wisdom.
Yes.
Richard,
Yes, I am on. Hello.
is there any words of wisdom that you want to share, Richard, that haven't been highlighted?
Well, number one, fantastic presentation and great additional supplements from Thomas Tudor. Good to hear you, Tom, and good to hear about your journey. One thing I'll add, because of the recent conversations around heat pumps and converting, I recently very happily retired my gas boiler, my propane gas boiler. So being in this business and having just bought my house, I knew the envelope needed work, and I did undershoot a little bit in terms of supplying with heat pumps. So I'm on the edge, and I've kind of witnessed it. And my one heat pump is heating my 1,600 square foot 2-story home, built in 2007, and not a super efficient one to begin with. And it's doing pretty well by itself without distributed heat. I just got to make sure all the doors are open. And it kind of reminds me of growing up. My parents had a wood cook stove, and that was the primary heat. And what made it up to the bedroom depended on whether you open the door to your bedroom. So if you're a teenager and need excessive privacy, you were a little colder. But it's worked great so far. And I actually noticed when I went up to air seal my attic myself on New Year's Eve, that was why I could stay up until midnight, because I'm older now and working physically, made me fall asleep sooner. I did a lot of air sealing up there, and my wife noticed that, and now our heat pump is working better. So even if you have a lot of small rooms, not a lot of open areas, it depends on how good your envelope is. But it all interacts, as Thomas said. There's a lot of moving parts here, and you can make improvements, but it is like tuning a piano. You have a lot of strings to get in alignment, and if you change the reference point, there's a lot of moving parts. But anyway, that's what I had to share.
Thank you, Richard.
Good to hear from you, Richard. Your team's attic insulation project did wonders for Milo Cape. So
Oh, woohoo!
So are we all done?
So just a couple quick announcements. So first, awesome, thank you so much to Paul and to Thomas and Richard. This was wonderful presentations. And I just wanted to give a quick heads up for some upcoming programs. Oh, thank you. Just to give a quick heads up for some upcoming programs. So this program is part of the Climate Conversation series hosted by the Patten Free Library, Ken Beckus Free Land Trust, and the Bath Climate Action Commission, and really spearheaded by the Climate Action Commission. And so we have 2 more parts to this series this year, and we'll have more coming next year. So the next Climate Action Commission program will actually build on some of the conversations today really well. So the next one is March 13th, and it's demystifying renewable energy. So it will dig more into some of the things that Thomas was sharing about the different options that you can have if you want to either install renewable energy at your house or connect with it in another way and engage with it in another way. So we're looking forward to that program. That'll be same time, same place, March 13th. And then on April 10th, the last program will be focused on landscaping and planting in your yard for climate change. So thinking about plantings that are good for pollinators, good for native plants, good for changing climate, and how do you blend all of those things together when you do work in your yard. As just another program that kind of ties into some of the conversations today that you might be interested in, the Kennebec Estuary Land Trust is hosting just a Zoom lecture program with a Brunswick resident, Sam Steltenstall, on shrinking your energy bills. And so that is going to be a program sharing, just giving an overview of a lot of the rebates that are out right now. So he'll give a broad overview, be available for questions. We're excited about it. That's going to be on February 22nd. You can sign up for Zoom for that. And yeah, so thank you all for coming. We do have some comment sheets at the back if you have recommendations for future programs. And the Climate Action Commission, right, is going to be digging into working on a climate action plan for the city. And so we'll be having more programs focused on that coming up in the next year. So we're excited to engage with you at more of these programs and that program in the future.